many more people coming, but it's still a bit early, so people can still arrive at a later stage. And now it's actually the boring parts, because I will do the introduction, and then after it will be the more interesting parts with more people are around. Then that's actually the most important. Now everybody should be able to see my screen if all goes well. It says that my screen is visible, so you should see a PowerPoint and with the intro slide. So hi again, I am Frank from ENIL. I'm here with also Kamil and Beyza from the ENIL Youth Network and Nick from the Youth Mental Health Network. And today we are going to talk about young people and the need for deinstitutionalization and community-based support. So this is the intro slide, and yes, now I'm going to give you some boring logistical stuff, but also very important, because this is a webinar, this is a platform, so we will do a bit of talking, but the purpose of the webinar is also that it is interactive. So the questions from the audience are very important. And for the moment, everybody is on mute, and you can see it because your microphone is orange. But then after the presentations, if you want to ask a question, you can either type the question in the question box that you see in your panel by typing the question and then send to all, or if you want to send the question privately, you can also send it privately to the organizers, but it's better, I think, if you send it to all, because then everybody can also see it. If you have any questions or technical problems during the webinar, you can use the chat function, which is completely below in the panel, and you can type your question or comment there and send it to the organizers and the panelists, and we will or to everyone as you prefer, and then we'll see it and we can solve it. If you want to ask the question just by talking, you can also go to the attendees panel, and then you see your name and you can raise your hand, and then we will see if somebody raised their hand, and I can unmute that person to ask the question after the presentation. Also, we have here the slides, and we are recording this webinar, so we will share the slides and the recording afterwards, so you don't need to worry about writing down everything. You will have both the slides and the recording to go back to afterwards. So this is, and now my slide needs to be changing. Yes, these are photos of us. So you see Kamil on the left, you see Nick, you see Beyza, and you see me. And I will be the moderator today, so that means that I will stop talking in a bit, and then you will have the more important and interesting information after. So what are we going to talk about? So first, Beyza and Kamil will speak about deinstitutionalization and the barriers to deinstitutionalization, but also the importance of living in the community, and why DI is not the best solution, or why DI is the solution and institutionalization is not the solution, rather. Then Nick will talk about the Euro Youth Mental Health event in Strasbourg a few weeks ago, and also about what is the Euro Youth Mental Health Network actually doing, and how are they facilitating the speaking about mental health across Europe. So without actually talking much more, I will now pass the floor to Beyza, and I will switch the screen to make sure you see also Beyza's slides. Let's see. So this is my first moderating experience, so I just need to make sure that I change the slides in an appropriate way. But it will work. Make presenter. Yes. Okay, Kamil, I think now you should also be able to share your screen and therefore slides. Yes, it worked.
Yes.
Great. Now I will stop talking, and yeah, I wish you all a very interesting webinar.
Thank you so much, Frank. You are great at moderating the webinar, I think. So hello, everyone. Welcome. And I'm really happy to be in this presentation, actually. So yeah, my name is Beyza, and I'm from ENIL Youth Network. I'm a board member, and I'm from Turkey, and also a clinical psychologist. So yes, we can move to the other slide. Kamil, please. Yes, thank you. I would like to start with a photo. And yeah, I will just shortly describe the photo in case that we have blind participants. And in that photo, there is me and the girl, and we are both in wheelchairs standing side by side. This girl is Vilma Hallgren, and she is 8 years old from Sweden. And we took that photo in ENIL Freedom Drive 2017 in Brussels. And the topic of this Freedom Drive was independent living, a voice for all. And Vilma was one of the speakers in that conference. And she talked about her experience as a disabled child, what helps her to live independently, and what the barriers are against her inclusion in the society. And this is important because disabled children's voices are often lost in disability and independent living activism, and that's why we will be talking about these today. Yes, Kamil, please. Can you? Yeah, thank you. And so we will be talking about disabled children. And according to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, those who are under the age of 18 are children. And UNCRPD defines disability as having long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which are in interaction with various barriers in the society, and this interaction hinder their full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. And these children, these disabled children have the same human rights as all children, as it is stated in CRC, and this means that they should be enjoying all these rights, and they also have the same rights outlined in the CRPD, including the right to live independently. And this means that the same extent of choice, freedom, and equality regarding their lives should be present, but choice and control are frequently a question in this case. But independence is not absolute when we talk about independent living for disabled children. And of course, it's not absolute for non-disabled children as well. But independent living for disabled children is more about the right to grow up in families, to access to mainstream education, and to interact with other children. And also, the wishes of disabled children should be taken into account when it comes to the decisions regarding their lives, such as deciding what to do after school, like involving in sports or cultural activities, or they should decide what hobbies they can have, or how they wish to spend their free time. And even some smallest decisions such as choosing their own clothes, and this can be even problematic in institutions. These are important choices, but some disabled children may not have them as a result of institutions. So can you change the slide, Kamil, please? So we will be talking about institutions, but I will talk about in a more general terms first, then I will talk about institutionalization of disabled children. So UNICEF estimates that the total number of children in institutional care is 2.2 million. And some resources say that it might be an underestimation too. But unfortunately, the number of disabled children in institutional care is not really known. And in a study conducted by Brown and their colleagues in 2005 in 15 European countries, neglect and abuse are found as the main reasons for institutionalization of children. But also the rate of institutionalization increases as a result of discrimination and negative social attitudes in the society if a child has some characteristics such as disability, for example. Disability is one of them. And it is especially true in the countries undergoing economic transition, and therefore this shows that when there is not adequate support for families of disabled children, institutions are considered as a choice. Maybe it is considered as a only option, and families have to leave their children to institution to take care of them. However, the evidence suggests that institutional care is detrimental to all developmental domains of children. And for example, children in institutional care have delays in their physical development, including their weight, length, and motor skills. And they experience hearing and vision problems as a result of understimulation or poor diet, and they also have poor health and sickness, and they perform poorly in intelligence tests, and they have problems in concentrating, and they have difficulties in language and social development, and they might experience attachment problems compared to the children in family settings or who live in the community. So these effects are explained by the effects of the environment in institutions, and of course these effects are more prominent among disabled children. Yes, can you change the slide, please, Kamil? And these effects are not limited to the ones I have told for disabled children, because institutional care has long-term and permanent negative impact on disabled children's life chances. So the disabled children who are in institutional care are less likely to have educational qualification, they are less likely to get into paid employment, and they are more likely to experience isolation when they become adults. And this means that institutional care is one of the barriers to the inclusion of disabled children in the society when they become adults too. And moreover, institutions have long-term negative social and economic consequences for the society as a whole, actually. Because as a result of institutionalization, disabled people are segregated from the community, and the existing discrimination actually continues, and at the end they cannot participate in economic life, and so it's a loss-loss situation for both the society and for the disabled person. And so in these institutions, we can say that there is no the opportunity to choose and control their own lives, and we know that for the independent living philosophy these are the most important things, and the lack of choice and control have also negative effects on the psychological development of disabled children. And according to the theories of psychosocial development, the challenges of first 5 years of life are building basic trust, having autonomy and taking initiatives. And of course, these challenges can be, in order to be successful in these challenges, you should have a supporting environment, and this environment should support your needs. But we know that in institutions, the care that is given is inconsistent, unpredictable, unreliable. Sometimes it is criticizing and overly controlling, and these result in mistrust, shame, and guilt in children. And so it means that they couldn't be successful in those challenges, and it will result in the problems in the future challenges as well when they become adults, when they have to form relationships, when they have to work, when they have to take responsibilities. It will become more difficult for the disabled children. So that's why lack of choice and control is important for everyone and for disabled children. But institutions are not solution for that, because because of the lack of choice and control, actually, as well. So yes, we can move to the last slide of mine. And so we will be discussing how children with disabilities can live independently. And first of all, as we talked in at the beginning, necessary conditions and services should be provided, because when they don't have these conditions and services, people have to leave their child to institutions. So community-based services should be provided, including inclusive education. And all of these services should be accessible for all children and families, and there should be a wide range of support for families to choose from, actually. So moreover, personal assistant is also an important component of living independent living, of course, and it is true for children too. But personal assistants should not replace parents. Instead, they are supervised by parents, but they are not. They don't work like parents. And families should also have access to technical aids and equipment, such as wheelchairs, for example, and they should also have communication support, especially for the parents of children with some language or hearing impairments. And accessible housing is also important for families to stay together. And this is how actually these disabled children can be included in the society. And the support should be given on time and continuously, because actually one of the problems is that this support might be limited, and what the needs for this support, if the needs for this support continues, then people will be in a difficult position, and they might choose institutions, actually. So this is how we should ensure that disabled children can have their independence, and then they can live independently, and they can be included in the community. And apart from this part, actually, Kamil will be talking about the youth and the importance of the institutionalization for the disabled youth. So thank you for listening, and I'm leaving the floor to Kamil.
So hello everyone, can you hear me? I hope you.
We can hear you, Kamil. Thank you.
Okay. So
yeah, we can hear him. Yep. Okay.
yeah.
I will be quiet again.
Yeah, I'm kidding. You know, you mute me, I unmute me. It's very confusing. Yeah, technological stuff. So hello everyone, I'm Kamil. Similar to Beyza, I am also board member of ENIL Youth Network, and I will speak about disabled youth, or as Marianne says in the picture, disabled and fabulous people. By the way, Marianne is a young, very active person in Norway, like really the future of the movement. So yeah, and Beyza did a great job already, so I won't elaborate too deeply in some aspects as we don't have so much time, but we will see a little bit things about youth. So one interesting thing for me and for other people as well is that there is not a single mention of young and youth people, of youth and young people in the UNCRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That's interesting to see, that because then we start to think, are youth rights important? Or maybe because there's this ideology in the society and everywhere that young people, first of all, how you define young people? Depending on the country or on the institution, young people are defined differently. For example, in Erasmus Plus program, young people are the ones from 18 to 30, if I'm correct. But some countries say, I don't know, 16 to 35 or something. Some organizations also have different definition. So how you define young youth and what is a young person is not clear to everyone. I mean, there's no one definition. So it's interesting. And there is this perception that young people belongs, I mean, the rights of youth belongs either to children's rights, with the CRC base I mentioned. So from 0 to 18 years old, they have their rights covered by the CRC, or to adults' rights, which every one of us has anyway, I mean, disabled or not disabled. So they say there is no need for youth rights, or yeah, that they are covered anyway. But the thing is that this is not happening, because our experience shows that young people and disabled people even more, but young in general, are discriminated in many fields just because we are young. For example, how many times you wanted to apply to a job or something, and you saw in the job description thing, one of the requirements to be like 5 years of experience, even for job, which for example, it's not needed, like, I don't know, social media management or something. And this means that they don't trust young people, and they want someone who is experienced and knows the job very well. But even though we are like born in the technology or everywhere. So yeah, and this is just a small example how young people can be discriminated. We are not trusted, we seem to not have experience and stuff like that. And of course, there's a big range of discrimination young people face in many different fields. If, for example, I heard from a friend in his country that the young people can job on an equal basis and equal salary with their peers, but they cannot be have insurance until a certain age. So they work on an equal basis, but not insured, because young people, I don't know exactly the policy of the company, but it is also discrimination. So that's why arises a discussion about the Youth Convention in general. European Youth Forum is bringing it a lot to discussion. We are partnering with them and co-working with them since many months, years, whatever. And there is a debate if it's necessary or no, why we should have it. Yeah, most of young people in this activism field believe that we should have a youth rights convention where we bring everything to it. Some other people think it's not necessary. As I said, I will leave it to you to decide, to everyone individually, if you think we need it or not. And let's go to the next slide. So institutions, as I write on my title, means no life for youth. And why I said that? Beyza already said some things about children, and many things are similar to youth as well. But let's talk like a little bit of, let's see some examples. So you see this on the screen, I have this graphic. In the middle, I put institutions with the red bad color. And I put some, how to say it, arrows, let's say, not arrows, like some connecting some connecting cycles to other fields which are affected by institutions. So if you are a young person and you are institution, you have reduced or the private in any way access to education. You cannot work, you cannot access employment because you have to follow the program of the institutions. They don't usually have people who could support you to go to employment or to school, as I said before, or to university. So yeah, you cannot evolve yourself. You cannot create skills. You are not able to have a relationship and to be sexually active, even with people from the same institutions, which is not ideal anyway. But even if you want to do from the same institutions, you still have people over your head, like saying you have to live in another room. You have from this time to this time you are free. This time you have to go to sleep. This time you have to eat. So yeah, you don't really have choice and control, as I write on my left bubble. And of course, even for fun activities like leisure, like I don't know, like if you want to go to cinema, you have to take a permission from institution. Or if you want to go for a coffee, and you don't even have your personal money, usually it's managed by the institution. I mean, depends on the institutions, of course. And I don't even go deeper. How are the conditions in institutions? That's another story, which is a big discussion. We don't have time to see it, but the conditions itself don't really are in many cases are really bad. You cannot even live in a proper way, in a human way. So yeah, but even if you can live, let's say, in a okay way, you cannot still do many things your peers without disability do. You cannot, you don't have any choice and control over your life. You have to follow the instructions of the institutions, and you cannot evolve yourself. And it's interesting, as you can see, I have a small bubble when I say luck. All these things, it's interesting to think about it, are related to luck. If you are lucky in your life and you find out about if you are born in a good family or if you know about the system, about your rights and things like that in the proper country and whatever, then you can live a good life. If you are unlucky one, with a family which is not supporting you, the country which is not that much into disability rights, or with a government who is not really interested and stuff like that, then your life is much difficult and you end up in a bad situation, usually in institutions. And that's not good, I think, because I mean everyone should have the same rights and everyone should have access to services and to everything. And we shouldn't depend on whether our government and our society allows us to have it or not. We should have it granted from the beginning, but now it doesn't happen. So if you are lucky and you know some things, you can develop yourself and you can live. Maybe if you're born rich, you have money to pay someone, or if you are in Sweden, you have right for personal assistance and stuff like that. But if you are born, I don't know, in Greece or in other countries, you have other things. So yeah, luck is a big aspect of whether you end up in institutions, how your life will evolve. And if you are a young person and your life depends on luck, that's problematic, as you can understand, because our future depends of if we are lucky or not. So we are not given the same opportunities from the beginning. We have to be lucky to live a life similar to the others. So let's go to the next. Before I go to the next slide, I want to also to say that this this bubble thing I put on my screen is just some of the examples which institutions affects our life, but it could go much deeper. I mean, there are all of aspects of an individual life are affected by institutions, usually in a bad way, or always in a bad way. Yeah, so let's go. So the importance of the eye. I will start with the picture. This guy is Glenn. He is from Belgium, and he has a sign who says, "Fix the system, not me." This is very interesting because it's a different perspective of how we see things happen. So yeah, the system is the one who is not working, and not we. It's not our impairment who is the problem, which is the problem. And so, as I said, the eye affects all the important aspects of young people's lives. And if we have good deinstitutionalization program in our country, in the world in general, then we are able to live properly as everyone else in every aspect of our life. If we don't, we have problems. Choice and control, as I said before, helps also young people to learn to be adult and to gain skills. But if you don't have choice and control and you are in an institution, you cannot develop these skills. So even if somehow happens and you leave institutions after 20 years or something, you are like not really developed because you didn't have the opportunities in the past. You lack in the educational skills, you lack in the other competencies. You don't know how to behave with people because you are in a closed, protected environment. So yeah, choice and control, and even as to making mistakes is very important for young people to develop themselves. We need to be able to decide as everyone else to do things, even if they are bad. They are also educating for us. So yeah, it's good. We learn from our mistakes and from our interaction with other people and from our peers. And it's not about charity, or it's our right. It's equal opportunities. We don't want charity. We don't want something we don't deserve just because we are awesome or just because we think we should have it. I don't know why. We just want it in order to live as everyone else, to be treated humanly. It's our right. It's, you know, the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, is ratified by most of the states in the world. So it's also legally binding now. So we can also fight saying that it's our right for that. And it's equal opportunities. If our peers are given the opportunity to work, to live themselves, to have a sexual life, we should have also the same opportunities. It's I think it's logical. So I will close my presentations, hopefully being on time, with the message already Beyza highlighted. Institutions are no solutions for young people as well. Thank you very much. And we are open to questions afterwards.
Yes, thank you, Kamil. I will now pass the screen to Nick, and my IT skills are like massively improving this morning, so that is hopefully a good thing. So Nick, now you should be able to control the screen and share your screen. Yes, it works. And also, just to announce, we already tripled in number of attendees since the start, so that is a good thing. And yeah, go ahead, Nick. I will shut up now and make sure you can talk.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Frank. Yeah, so today, well, just to say thank you to Beyza and Kamil for that presentation as well, very informative, and I've already got some questions potentially to ask you both afterwards. Been writing notes here as you've been going. Yeah, so today, my name's Nick. I'm a co-director for a community interest company based in the UK called ENIL Youth Mental Health. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about what we do, but primarily today going to talk about some of our experiences at the European Youth event a few weeks ago, where we delivered a piece of work called Speak Your Mind and had conversations with lots of different people, professionals and young people, about mental health and on the European level, what that looks like and what that means. And I guess towards the end, I'll tell you a bit more about what our next plans are as an organisation. And you can get in touch and go to our website if you'd like to see and know more, and go from there. So yes, I'm just gonna, so you can see the first slide, working with young people in Europe to ensure happy and healthy futures. Just check this works now. Yeah, here we go. So as mentioned, we were set up about, well, formally as a community interest company, which as a not-for-profit, in December last year, based on a thesis I did for my master's a couple of years previous, where I noticed this sentence, I guess, around there's a large gap in the quality of services and education across Europe for young people and their mental health needs, and we're aiming to bridge that gap. Yeah, so set up as a CIC in December 2012. We're currently 3 passionate volunteers with backgrounds in psychology, youth work, participation, mental health, European-wide working, social work facilitation, and various other bits of skills. As mentioned, I'm co-director. That's me on the left there, bald and with the beard. Yeah, I do this in my spare time. My day job, I also work for a mental health charity in the UK called the Anna Freud National Centre for Children and Families as a participation officer. So part of my kind of big passion and beliefs is around engaging young people in things that affect them. And then on the right, you've got Irina Buriana, who has been brilliant in helping me with coming up with various pieces of work, and was one of the main authors of the workshop that we ended up taking to Strasbourg earlier this year. Yeah, so a tiny bit about me. I'm not going to go on too much. You can find out more if you want to email me, but I'm a youth worker by trade. That's where my life started, and I accidentally fell into the world of mental health, and fell in love, I guess, with for better of a word, wanting to improve that situation for young people and myself. I suffer from anxiety on a very ad hoc basis. I manage it very well at the moment, but obviously, as we all know, we all have ups and downs, as we all have mental health, and it's not always in the best place, and we deal with it day by day. So this is our mission statement. It's quite broad looking. We act in order to create the Europe that enables young people to access support and talk openly about their mental health and well-being by encouraging collaboration across services, sharing of best practice, and ensuring that young people are empowered to have a voice in all matters that affect them around the promotion of mental health and preventing the impact of mental illness. Just to highlight the bit around collaboration and sharing best practice related to my the thesis that kind of inspired the idea and the vision to start something like this organization, is that there's actually lots of good work going on across the continent, but there's currently no kind of facilitation on how to share that work, and also ensuring that if you are sharing that work, that cultural context is taken into place for the young people that you're working with as well. But so on to Strasbourg. Yeah, so a couple of months ago, we applied to deliver a workshop at the European Youth event, which happens every 2 years, and it was in Strasbourg, and we were successful. And so we delivered something called Speak Your Mind, which was a playful and engaging session exploring young people's areas of mental health and mapping out recommendations and the future implications that need to be considered to ensure happy and healthy lives for young people. Yeah, so we were delivering that at the weekend, but we managed to have, we were due to take 10 people, but ended up with quite a few last minute cancellations due to illness and other things. Ended up being 7 of us. 4 of us who were facilitators from various backgrounds, and then 3 young people from different places, and we were all from from different countries across Europe. Yeah, and then managed to engage in a lot of different things across the event. Yeah, so I'll delve straight into the so we managed to set up a few different meetings as the event went on. One of them was meeting with a member of the European Parliament from the Czech Republic called Tomáš Dečovský. So that's myself there, and that's one of our facilitators, Johnny Benjamin, who's also from the UK. And yeah, we only managed the meeting for about 20 minutes to half an hour, as you can imagine with politicians. It was a very interesting conversation, and Tomáš talked about his personal reflections on his brother suffers from schizophrenia, and how that made him kind of want to create a change and to trying to be a lead in making change. And so him and his, I guess, European areas very much around hosting workshops and ideas and think tanks around how we improve mental health services, broadly speaking, not just young people, but across the entire spectrum. So he does a bit of work with Mental Health Europe. They're hosting an event in July, looking at co-production around mental health, which none of us can sadly attend, but we're hoping to write a more formal report based on our time in Strasbourg to send out so that they can print and have there for them to look at. Yeah, he's offered lots of support in being able to direct us to the right people and to help us with any projects and funding and things like that in the future, and his team. So we're looking forward to continuing that collaboration with Tomáš and his team. So on to the session itself. I'm just going to pause a sec there before we go into it. So as mentioned, it was a playful session. So the idea was we had an hour and a half. We had, and we were fully booked. We had a room with a 40 people capacity, which was sold out, if you will, if you wanted to look at it like a gig. Within the first few hours of the workshops opening, because people had to plan what they wanted to see. Also on that day, we ended up having quite a few people drop in as well. But obviously we were very attentive in making sure that it wasn't a health and safety risk and that people could get to the exit, but the room was packed. Our session involved a lot of standing up and moving about, so there wasn't the need kind of to sit around in a formal room. Yeah, so there was 3 parts to the session. One of it was initially trying to cause a slight bit of discomfort amongst the attendees, to kind of put them in the same shoes as maybe people around Europe, or young people around Europe currently have when wanting to talk about their feelings. Having visited lots of different countries and spoken to many young people from different countries across Europe, you know, talking about your feelings or how you really feel is still very much a bit of a taboo, and people don't necessarily want to admit when someone says, "Hi, how are you?" You generally just say, we're definitely in the UK, "Yeah, fine, thanks." That's not an honest answer. That's just how you reply. You know, but there's also an anxiety that if you turned around and went, "Oh, actually, I'm feeling a bit crap today," that might cause the other person to maybe freak out, and not because they're worried, but because they don't know how to react to that. We're not told how to deal with emotional difficulties as human beings that well. You know, we're taught first aid, we're taught how to maybe help someone who's unconscious, quite young ages. It's quite open in a lot of places in the world to do that, physical first aid, and you learn biology and things at school about the body and how the body works, but not so much about how the mind works, both kind of physical in a biology sense and in a mindful and emotional sense. So we got them into 3 groups, and one group had to learn how to juggle, one group suddenly got put on the spot and had to sing, and another group had to be asked. So they played a game where they pretended to kiss a bunny rabbit, but then had to kiss the person next to them on the same spot. Obviously, there was no forcing of having to do that activity, but the idea was to ask them then how it felt afterwards. After that, we then did a very broad exercise looking at what is mental health. I've not written up our notes. I've just thought I'd show you what some of the things were that we came up with. And we got them into different 3 groups and asked them to come up what mental health meant for them. As a group planning this, we were a bit anxious that we might get lots of people talking about terminology of mental health, such as depression, schizophrenia, anxiety, and those being the main words that came up. But we were very pleasantly surprised. And when you look at these 3 flip charts, excuse the writings if you can't understand it, mine is the worst one on the right. You can see that it's actually quite broad and quite an informative perspective that the young people in this workshop gave. You can see that it talks about inner peace, stress management. There's a few different bits about balance. I think all of them cover balance, taking care of yourself. And you can see things like invisible, which is a really interesting point to talk about, because obviously when someone's broken their leg, you can usually tell they're either wailing in pain, they're on crutches, where if someone's maybe in the current state of mind suffering with depression, you can't actually see that unless it's all the time. That person might put on a front when they're at work or in school, and then go home and that's when they can show how they really feel. There's also something around what's good for you ain't necessarily good for someone else, and understanding that people's contexts and perspectives in life differ, and you can't expect everyone to react similarly emotionally to certain things. And being able to cope, the top one on the left side there, which is part of many definitions that are provided by various bodies, is the ability to cope with day-to-day stresses, which we did go on to talk about, because after this exercise we showed them a couple of definitions, one from the dictionary, one from World Health Organization, and one from Mental Health Foundation. And this exercise was really to look at how different everyone's understanding of mental health was, is that the definition is so different across the world. And it was to start a discussion amongst a group of young people from various places across Europe about what they see mental health as, and about leading towards what Kamil was talking about, is different definitions around, do we need a more European-based definition, a more young person-based definition, and what they think it is, and can it be an evolving piece of work? After this, we then got them into an exercise where we asked them what areas of their life impacted their mental health the most. So, for example, we expected potentially things like school and maybe friends, and so on. And then what we got them to do then was to vote on, as a group, and I think there was probably about 55 people in the group, to vote on their top 3. So they got given stickers to vote on their top 3, and the top 3 that came up were these. Were equality, which was really interesting. It's not one we expected as a thing to come up. Expectations, and that was also kind of expectations put on them by other people, and expectations they put on themselves, which I guess essentially comes from other people. And then relationships. I know the light's not great on that photo. I'll go through each one a bit now. And so what we did afterwards is we got them into these three groups of each of these sections and asked them to come up with why they thought this impacted their mental health, and what maybe could be done to help alleviate any difficulties that these subjects inflicted upon their mental health. So the equality one was quite interesting. I think it's not something that is seen broadly in around the world of mental health. When I do a lot of mental health workshops or talk about mental health with schools and other young people, it's not something that comes up really. But it clearly is amongst this group of young people, was something that came up. What I'd like to draw attention to with this, though, is there's a comment roundabout in the middle that talks about free mental health service. which struck a chord with myself personally. Maybe it isn't free anywhere, and I know in some countries I've visited, talking about the worry of the institutionalization of mental health, which still goes on in only in a few countries, in that you tell someone that you're self-harming when you're 14, you'd be immediately carted off to a hospital or something. And it talks about, I guess, the equal identity of disabled and other in other nations, making activities accessible for young people with disabilities. So this is where the conversation starts to get interesting around physical disabilities and mental disabilities, which I'll talk a bit about later in a piece of work we might be doing next year. Expectations. So I guess this one for me fell into kind of we were expecting it to be very specific. And so things like education was talked in expectations, about the expectations of young people across Europe at the moment around being able to get a job, being mobile, as we call it, and being able to just get up and leave your family potentially to go and get a job somewhere else in Europe. And also grades and expectations of qualifications. So again, this was an interesting discussion around the second one, around how to receive impact, which I thought was feedback, which I thought was really interesting. It's not something I think we're taught how to do. And I'm 34, and I like to think I'm quite mature, and we always offer feedback when we deliver a piece of work. Please tell us how we went, but how you react to some of it isn't always how you think you should. Knowing yours and other expectations, I think that's really important, and that relates really closely to around mental health, is being able to be okay with what your abilities are, and where you can go with that, and that you can change, but you're not necessarily going to be able to do everything that you would like to do. I certainly can't do everything I'd like to do. There's certain things I'm not very good at, and that's why I get friends and colleagues to help me with it. And there's something about educating everyone there, and the room to fail, which I think is really important. A lot of my anxiety has been caused personally around the workplace and the perfectionism that comes sometimes with certain work environments, which I know, having done some work in the UK, we've got private schools, so they're kind of paid for by families who maybe have the ability to pay for them. And the expectations on those children often kind of inflicts this "there's no room to fail" mentality. And then lastly, relationships. This was something that we did maybe expect. I know the lighting isn't very good on that picture. And as mentioned, it's all going to be written up in a more formal report soon. But it talks about, if you can't see it, it talks about what is a healthy relationship, is the second one up there, which is very important. Again, something that's not really taught in our education systems across Europe. Is what is a healthy relationship? What does that look like? And also then, as you go down, you've got things around acceptance, trying to remove the ideas of shame and stigma. So what is our relationship with mental health? Understanding and empathy. All of these things around relationships relate quite closely to mental health. And you could argue in our relationship with ourselves. So you've got someone's written time for self-care, learning about yourself. Definitely I don't remember ever learning about that in school. And then obviously your relationships with others, being able to communicate better and how we communicate. I just think this was for me one of the best things of the session, and this was the end of the session. We had loads of young people want to get more involved in the work we want to do, but afterwards we were all buzzing with all of this information and idea, and the idea that potentially this could be something that we can take around Europe to different countries to try and develop a bigger picture. So watch this space. Who knows what will happen. So we did that, and that was amazing. And just to hear and talk to young people who are very enthusiastic about mental health. And I guess going back to the broad ideas that they'd come up with about what mental health is, the people who signed up to this workshop obviously had an interest in it and a knowledge base of it. If we did the similar question to, for example, what is mental health, maybe in a school in Poland with a generic group of young people, And by generic, I mean a classroom. You might come up with very different things. So, and then moving on, lastly, at quite a last minute thing, I was offered to come and sit on a panel by a Besu. That's not a Bescu, it's Besu. You can see in the tweet there, that's my typo. With various other professionals to talk about mental health and education. So the topic was too many young people face mental health issues, but what can we do to prevent it in schools? Closely linked to what I was briefly talking about with education. And this was in a room of about 40 to 50 young people, and then you had various different professionals in there as well. So you had Marianne Sedlak from the International Federation of Medical Students Association, and yeah, who talks about, one doctor out of 4 has a mental health issue, and so thinking about that idea of who helps the helpers. And that goes back to what we were talking about, is about self-care. We then did something called a Mentimeter, which is a live poll that people can do on their phones, and the question was, what would you do if you were struggling from a mental health difficulty, or if you were struggling with your emotions? And the options were not speak to anyone, speak to a friend, or speak to a professional. And almost half the room said that they wouldn't speak to anyone if they had a mental health issue, which I guess is quite sad, but it gives it a lot of reality and awareness in that you.
Nick, we can't hear you anymore. At least I can't.
Though we were in spaces.
No, still can't hear you.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. Hello, how about now?
Yeah, now we can.
Yeah.
Let me try again. 1 second. How about now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, apologies everyone.
No worries.
Fun of technical. So where did I cut out?
You were just talking about that the people sitting in the room were mentioning they would not speak about mental health issues to anyone.
Okay, thanks, Frank.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I was just elaborating on how that is obviously quite a daunting and scary thing to think about, that even though we were in this safe place where everyone's there to talk about mental health, people still didn't feel comfortable talking about it. And there's obviously something we need to do as a community, a collective, to try and change that and educate both, all parents, professionals, young people, to be okay what to do if a friend talks to you about mental health, and how to open up about your mental health. Laura from Mental Health Europe. So the panel initially talked about, is there a crisis now? And she said, well, she doesn't believe there is a crisis. It's the way our society works that generates mental health issues in our population. Again, linking quite closely to what Kamil and Beyza were talking about, that it's not us that needs to change, it's society. And very true, it's the same sort of thing. And she gave a very good statistic around, I think it's something like 1 in 4 young people have a mental health problem. Is a generic stat that goes around all the time. And we're talking about a crisis with mental health at the moment, but I think some of this, there was another statistic then where I think it's 1 in 4 or 1 in 3 people get cancer. But we don't talk about a cancer crisis. I mean, cancer is horrible, obviously, and we all appreciate that. But you don't hear that phrase shouted around the news. So it's about perspective, obviously, and looking at actually, I mean, we all have mental health, so this isn't a surprise. And agree with her. It's not a crisis, it's just that more people are talking about it now, so people think it's a crisis because people are talking about it, but it's not. It's just something we need to help. And then lastly, Olivia Klein from Obesu Mental Health Working Group reminded us that parents and siblings must be aware and informed in order to help young people facing mental health issues. So as I was just elaborating on the idea of that actually, we can educate and work with young people and professionals, but also parents, siblings, society in general needs to be more open and understanding of what these things are. It's not anyone's fault that people are a bit daunted or scared or put off to talk about their mental health, other than maybe the institutions that are supposed to be educating us on certain issues. Yeah, so that was a really interesting panel. Hopefully some work coming out of that. Yeah, and that was kind of it. We had fun. We celebrated afterwards how well the workshop went, and we've had myself and Lorena have had some very brief discussions about what next. And we're going to have a more elaborate discussion as the months come. So yeah, so what next for us? So as an organisation, we're going to follow up on all the conversations we had and ensure that youth mental health is a focus in all areas of life. Hashtag mental education, working title. So you've heard me talk a lot about education and awareness today, and I think it seemed, and we were discussing the other day, starting the beginnings of a campaign to develop something like a co-signed letter to relevant institutions along the lines of a minimum standard of mental health education in all member states. Curriculums at school, physical health is taught at every school as far as I'm aware in Europe. In the UK we call it physical education, PE. And so why is there not an ME or mental education? Looking at both the philosophical and the kind of psychological and the biological things around how your head works, essentially. As mentioned, we're going to write up findings from a report and share this specifically with the Parliamentary Interest Group on Mental Health and Brain Disorders, also known as GAMIAN. And yeah, we're going to apply for some more work in educating and sharing best practice of mental health support across the social health sector in Europe. We're a very young organisation, so we're still finding our feet on what we can offer. I guess as well as this, it's worth mentioning that we'll be developing potentially bespoke awareness training sessions in English to train people, youth workers, in different countries across Europe, to then go on and train other professionals in kind of basic knowledge sharing and awareness and education around mental health and what can help them to know when working with young people with mental health. I had a very good conversation with someone from the General Directorate of Employment at the European Commission, talking about young people's resilience when unemployed and how they want to link with youth workers, but when they're unemployed, they're kind of held, but that actually youth workers maybe don't have enough training to be able to deal with a young person's depression or anxiety around finding a job, which comes from that vicious circle of not being able to find employment. And lastly, to say as well, so we have worked very closely with ENIL and ENIL Youth, and we are going to be delivering something next year as part of the Council of Europe's education programme, exploring the idea of the term disabled and its links with physical and mental health, and also how people and how that affects each other. Yeah, so watch this space for that piece of work, which will be coming out next summer, I think. Yeah, and I guess that's it from myself. I hope that was informative and you're glad you listened and watched. So yeah, I guess I'm going to hand over back to Frank, who's going to now facilitate a Q&A, I believe. You can see our website there and my email if you'd like to know more, potentially work together. Please get in touch. I know Frank is sending the slides around afterwards as well. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. It's been a pleasure to be part of this webinar. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks for your presentation as well. It was really, really good, and I will make myself presenter again so I can show my screen. Let's see if it works. So now you should be all seeing my screen, and we are doing quite well on timing, so we still have time for lots of questions and discussions. So if you have a question, you can type it in the questions box, or you can raise your hand, as I see that already some of you did, so that I can unmute you and you can like ask the question by speaking. So I see that there is a raised hand from Caesar. So Caesar, I will unmute you now, and you can ask a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Frank.
Hi, Caesar.
It may be answered by any of the three speakers this morning, and it's about the difficulty I have when speaking about inclusion in general and in the field of education, in particular about children, youth, and people with mental health issues. And it comes when we talk about these people's behavior. They always come out with, oh yes, but institutions are the best if their behavior is really disruptive. What do you think about that? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Cedar, for your question. So yes, how to talk about this? Like when you talk about inclusion and then special education, there is a tendency to say yes, but if people have really mental health problem and disruptive behaviors, it is best to well, make sure they're in institutions and well cared for to make the best quality education. So how can we tackle this problem to say no, inclusion is possible, and how to approach this? Who would like to respond first, or who would like to respond to this? I will unmute you also. You can just unmute yourself if you want to reply.
Hello, it's Nick here.
Okay, hi
Hello?
Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, am I right to start? Yeah, thanks for your question, Caesar. It's a really interesting point, and I guess in terms of inclusion, it goes back to all types of disability, in that spaces should be attempting to be able to include all people in their work. So in terms of education, and potentially maybe a mental health issue causing disruptive behavior, I think my opinion, as a personal opinion, I think there is much needed education for teachers, I guess, to have the tools to recognize if a young person is struggling with a mental health difficulty in schools. Quite commonly in a lot of research, those who identify as female are a lot more open in talking about their feelings, and whereas it's been quite commonly known that those identify as male would act out, and so maybe, let's say, throw a chair, and often that's confused as poor behavior. and they might get sent out of the classroom, and then they come back in an hour later and they've calmed down, absolutely. And that's that. But that's the end of the discussion. So I think in order for it to be a lot more inclusive in schools, I think teachers still need a bit more training on this topic. Who provides that? Is that anyone's kind of welcome to open that. But it is something that, for example, in the UK, I know there's quite a lot of training available currently for young teachers. We do something which is there's a program called Mental Health First Aid, set up by an Australian company, but it's across the world now. I think it's in about 6 countries in Europe. I'm a youth mental health first aid instructor. So and the course teaches you signs and symptoms of a variety of mental health issues and how to help people who are having a crisis related to each issue. But that being said, I guess I would, in terms of institutions, there aren't, as far as I'm aware, kind of like separated schools in the sense of mental health, but there are schools that we prefer to call sort of alternative provision, because sometimes and it's, again, I guess it's the ability of and training and expectations of our education systems in different countries varies, and sometimes you need to we as individuals, so not related to our diagnosis or ability, but individuals might need to take a step back with our family, with a professional, to work out how mainstream education can work for us. I referred to there's a school in the UK in London called the Family School, which is an alternative provision for young people who are struggling in mainstream education, and they maybe are there for a year with their family are involved a lot. So every Wednesday a family member goes to school with them. And then they go back into mainstream, and it might be that then some teachers in that school will have received some training or input on how to work with that person to ensure that they are included in that school. It's a fine line, because obviously you don't want to disrupt everyone's education, but it's trying to make sure that we are able to educate all. Sorry if I went on a bit. I'll open it up to Beyza or Kamil if they want to add on.
Yeah, actually, I have something to add. And I also believe that in order to prevent the institutionalization of people with mental health problems, I believe that we should really work on also on preventive. In preventing these mental health problems, actually, because many of the things that is going on in our societies are about curing them, but even they are not really adequate for now. But we can really stop some mental health problems to become very problematic before. We can stop them through these interventions, through these preventive techniques, and so that we can stop to become problematic in order to require hospitalization or institutionalization against the wills of people, actually. So I believe that's one of the most important part, actually, to support the mental health of people, both young and older people, to prevent the institutionalization and to provide the inclusion, actually. Thank you.
As for me, I want, Nick and Beyza already covered me a lot, so I won't really add something. I just want to say 2 very small things, mostly already highlighted, but anyway, just as a reminder that one thing is that mental health issues often, I'm not an expert in any way, but so feel free to correct me, but mental health issues often evolve and arise when in places which we have not the conditions we should, like like we said earlier about institutions, for example. So if you had segregated education, it's the same thing. So maybe in an inclusive education from the beginning for everyone, people would have less mental health issues probably, or less severe, things like that. So it's also good for mental health purposes. I think that's one. And the other thing I wanted to say is that about the importance of inclusive education for another way. So today, disabled people, either they have mental issues or physical disabilities or whatever it is, face kind of have a stigma or a discrimination in the society because people don't know about them, what is disability, what is mental health, why it's not sickness, or what is not dangerous, or what it's not whatever. But if we grow from the very beginning in the same schools with everyone, and we learn from each other, so the society will be more. Yeah, I don't like the word tolerant because I don't want people to be tolerant with me, but I think that's one word which kind of describe what I want to say. So the society, the people will become more tolerant from the very young age, and they will see people with disabilities or disabled people similar to themselves, and not as something strange and awkward and dangerous, sick and whatever. So it helps to inclusion in general. I don't know if that makes any sense what I said, but that's more or less what I wanted to stress.
Okay. No, I think it was making sense. All the answers, and what I remember of it is like inclusive environment will prevent exclusion in itself, so we should work on this, but also educate the educators and not only help the helpers in a way. So I see that Caesar has a follow-up question. So I will unmute you again, Caesar, and then also Nick has a question. So we have already two questions. So I will unmute you, Caesar, and now you should be able to talk.
Sorry, very briefly, I forgot to say before that people think that they use their people with disabilities use their impairment as an excuse for their misbehavior or their disruptive behavior. Do you think that happens? Really? Because I don't.
Okay, so that's a very good question again, Caesar. Like that, there is the big blocking as well for the inclusion is that there is the fact that sometimes there is the stigma that people with disability use their impairment as an excuse for misbehavior, so that actually disabled people should not like misbehave so much and say, it's because I'm disabled. So this is used as an excuse for people who say it is better to go to institutions than to go to inclusive schools, because all those disabled people are only using their disability as an excuse to have privileges and to misbehave. So how to debunk that myth, or how to counter this argument? And I think this is a very good question indeed. So who would like to start with an answer on that? It is also a very challenging question, so you have put a challenge to our panelists, Caesar, but that's good. I see Kamil.
Yeah, I wanted to say that indeed it's challenging, and it's a big discussion, and we don't have very much time now to discuss it. Maybe we can do a webinar in the future, especially about this topic, but very quickly to say that indeed this is an issue, and we see it from our environments and from the movement ourselves, how disabled people use the disability or impairment or whatever you want to say it, and for what advantages and what is the image we want to show to the society, and how we want to use it, and what we want to achieve it thanks to that, and we don't agree with each other. I mean, other people want to show that we are the big, I mean, disabled people, we ourselves, some of us want to show that we are the victims of the lives, and we deserve pity, and we deserve everything good because life is not treating us well. Other people says we are quite lucky anyway, we have good lives, and we could, other people cannot eat something, or they don't have home, so it's a totally different perception. And so it depends on what disabled people you meet and how they behave, but indeed this is an issue in the society. And if we in our movement, what we try to do in our organization, when we want to raise awareness about independent living, the social model of disability, and everything, is not only raise awareness to the society, to the policymakers and everything, but we want also to address the disabled people themselves, the families especially, because the families are really influential in the lives of disabled people. How you use the disability and how you want and what you want to achieve. I don't want, again, if it makes sense and if it answers your question, but yeah, that's what I wanted to comment on this.
Thanks very much, Kamil. Anybody else want to comment on that? Or I think it's indeed it's challenging, and it might be good to organize indeed a separate webinar on it. But Nick, the floor is you.
Yeah, just a quick one. It is a very interesting topic. And I guess one thing I've thought of is that as human beings by nature, occasionally we can succumb to using or learning how to maybe exploit what's going on for us. I guess exploit's probably quite a strong word, but I know what you're saying, Caesar, is you know, and I've worked with young people who kind of maybe suffering from long-term depression would use, and having developed my own skill set in therapeutic working and stuff, you learned how to tell the difference when someone's seriously in a difficult situation with their depression, and when someone is, apologies for that, and when someone is what we would say in the UK, taking the mick, which is essentially lying about something in order to get what you want. And yeah, it does happen, but it happens across all people, I think.
Yes, I think it's and thanks for also suggesting it, Caesar, and thanks also for the answering, because I think indeed it is, as Kamil also said, and as Nick is saying, it is happening sometimes, but it is of course not an excuse not to go for inclusion. So it would be a good topic to also do a separate session on. So I'm seeing that we are kind of almost. Oh, sorry, Nick, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
Okay, so I'm seeing that we're almost out of time, but just Nick, you also had a question, so please go ahead and ask it.
Yeah, again, time-wise. Yeah, so I guess it's to Kamil and Beyza around the term of institution and independent living, so I'm thinking of care homes in the sense that, so I've worked with, say, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds who don't have or can't live at home for whatever reason, and by home I mean with a parent or guardian, and so let's say it's because of a mental health problem, so they'll be put into what's known as supported accommodation, where they would potentially start to learn independent living skills with the idea that when they get to 18 they might be able to live on their own in a state-funded flat. What's the, I mean, the definition
The audio is
Nick,
gone again, Nick.
we can't hear you again. Yeah. Nick?
Hello. Okay, the webinar platform is saying it is already 3 minutes after past, so we are abandoning all the technological support. Okay,
he says
Nick
he
is
will
putting,
email the
yeah.
question. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's perfect. We will then reply to questions by email. And also, because the time is running out, this was actually, I think it's on my next slide. Oh no, in my next slide, it is just to make a promotion for the next webinar, which I will quickly do. So we will have the next webinar on the 27th of July about supporting people with more complicated support needs, where there will be a live planning coach as a speaker to talk about how it is done in practice. You can find registration again in our newsletters and via Facebook as usual. Then this is just information about ECCL, which I will not go into now, but this is the important bit. Here you have all our email addresses, and we are very happy to get back to you via email if you want more information or have any other questions at any time about the things we discuss here. So, well, and also we will share the slides and the recording. So yeah, I think that's it. Yes, here you see our pictures again, and the email address, which is community-living or community-living.info. So yeah, I think that we had a very good discussion also with some questions, but as was said, you can mail questions at any time and we will get back to you and you will receive an email with the slides and the recording. So hope to see you all on the 27th of July for the next webinar. And now I will end the webinar, which is always done in quite an abrupt way, which is just it will disappear. So be prepared, and thanks to all of you, thanks to the speakers as well, thanks to Beyza, thanks to Kamil, thanks to Nick, and thanks for all of you to participating, and hope to see you all next time. So have a good weekend, and yeah, goodbye.
Thank you guys, enjoy your weekend.
You all.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.